I promised you a feeding tip. We've been talking about challenging behavior, and sometimes the food thing, I gotta say, there is an element to it because it's emotional. We want to nurture, we want to feed our children, we want them to enjoy it, we feel that responsibility. There's an emotional tug there. And it's power packed for all of us. Our food, I always say you go to something and the people's responses. I went to it wasn't really a funeral, it was a memorial service, and it was a very interesting. We went to the beach and had this lovely thing where everybody talked and shared about this wonderful person who had passed, and then we all went back to a house and we were waiting. They were gonna, everybody was promised this spread, and there's something that grief and food, and but it was just so interesting to watch how people reacted, because the person who the caterer was late and they got lost, and oh my gosh, it was about an hour and a half that all these people that were grief-stricken were waiting for food, and it was just very interesting to watch the behavior and how emotional people got because the food was not there, and how everybody put all of the emphasis on the food when really the truth was that everybody was feeling the grief and the loss, right? But there is something about food. Watch the holidays, right? And people are like, no, we have to have this food. No, we can't have that food. Why can't this person eat this? How can you never eat that? Oh, it's emotional, right? And as parents, feeding our children, and I think, I know some men that are this way, but especially the moms were like, I want to feed my child. Food is love sometimes, right? And for our kids, I think all kids have issues, but especially for our kids, they have extra issues sometimes. And how do we combat that, right? And I've said before that my child, he's very good about eating his veggies. He is a very healthy eater, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't have issues, right? Because sometimes our kids have issues with categories of foods, that it's like, well, I don't like this texture, and I don't like this temperature, and I don't like this color. And of course, they don't say that. As if they said, well, I don't care for the texture of a banana. If only, right? If only we could get to the point with functional communication skills where we could get to that. But instead, they spit it out, they scream, they cry, they act as if it is life and death, that it's just horrifying to them. It's traumatizing to them. And I think a lot of times we become fearful about the battle for food. And I think the good news about that, if there is good news about that, is that it really shouldn't be a battle, right? We don't want to battle at the table. We don't want to battle over the food. So the first thing that we always hear from the experts is don't battle. Don't. But we can affect change. We don't just accept and go, well, my child only eats French fries and chicken nuggets, because that is not appropriate. And I think we all know that, but there are days when it seems like a good idea, right? When you just don't have the energy or the strength to battle it. And, and that's okay occasionally, but we can't just accept, okay, there's only two things that my child will eat. So when we have the issue specifically with textures or colors or temperatures, what we want to do is, our word the other day was systematic desensitization, right? So we want to do that with food. We want to systematically desensitize them to whatever the big is with the texture or the color or the temperature. And we can do that ever so slowly. Because we don't want to get to the point where we overwhelm them. We've had several different food experts come in and talk about the fact that if your child has an issue with texture, let's say that your child they were fine with baby food and they're not eating anything that has any kind of a grain to it or any kind of a crunch to it, and you need to make that change. Hopefully you already have the food processor, but if you don't, you're going to need to get a food processor. And what you're going to do is, for a short period of time, you're going to keep giving them the texture that they like. And I guess it goes both ways, because there are some kids who don't want to eat, like my son does not like creamy. And we've worked over a long period of time to the point where, he likes things that are crunchy, and then we made things, a little less crunchy, and eventually to things that are smoother. And preferential, especially when it's textures, making sure that the taste of it is something that they already prefer. Because my son, creamy, smooth, didn't want to do, but he loved the texture, or he loved the taste of things like mutabul, which is eggplant that's smooth, and hummus. My son loves bitter tastes. So that tahini, the sesame seed paste that's in the baba ganoush or the mutabul, and the hummus. And if you don't know these things, if you've never had hummus or mutabul or baba ganoush, and you like the taste of bitter things, I thoroughly encourage you to try those things. They're wonderful. And my son loves those. And so that's kind of how we got him more towards a smooth category. But most of the time, I think it's the other way around, that kids prefer the smooth and don't want to go to the grainy kind of textures. So you do it very slowly. You give them very smooth, and then you just push the food processor 1 second less. So it's just got a little bit of chunk to it, and then a little bit of grain to it, and you work your way up over a period of weeks. Just slowly, and if you get to the point where the child refuses, you go back to the last place, like a prompt. You go back to the last place that it worked and reinforce that and go, oh, you're doing such a good job eating that. You're such a big girl. You're such a big boy. And, if you eat this, then we're going to go and do this afterwards. And I'm so proud of you. And really reinforcing that with whatever reinforces them. That's what's really important. And slowly grain your way to the point in the food processor where they're eating things that have texture to them. Same thing with colors, that, if you see that the child just absolutely only wants to eat white things, right? You can slowly go to something that's yellow, or slowly go to something that's light green. I think it's important to encourage them to play with their food. So if your child, for instance, likes mashed potatoes, and maybe you can't eat potatoes, but you're doing mashed cauliflower instead, which, especially if you put some mashed white beans in with the cauliflower, you're going to get something that's really healthy. And if they like mashed potatoes and can't have it, then mashed cauliflower with mashed white beans in it, it kind of has the same flavor and texture as potatoes. I don't know how that works, but it does. But one of the things that we've done over the years is that we talk about eating the rainbow and how fun it is to put different colors in, and like, how sometimes you play with paint and you take some yellow paint and you take some blue paint and you put it together and it makes green. Well, if you've got mashed potatoes and you take some spinach and grind it up and add it to it, it turns it bright green. Then they're more interested in eating it as a result of, and if you put just a little bit of fresh spinach in it, they're not going to balk at the spinach. We've also learned from the experts that if you take just a little bit of something, put it with something that they do like, and over time increase the amount of the non-preferred food, their taste buds acclimatize to it. And of course, the thing that I've heard over and over again that I'm amazed at is that it literally takes, on average, 20 times of presenting a food before a child will actually eat it. 20 times. I think I gave up well before that. So don't give up, but move slowly. Slowly remove yourself from the battle, put it on the plate, so you got the chicken nuggets and you got the french fries there, and you put the mashed cauliflower there too, and you don't have to talk about it. You don't have, you really don't. You can say, there it is. And if they don't eat it the first couple of times, it's not the end of the world. Maybe the third time that you put it there, you go, okay, if you only put 2 nuggets instead of 3 on the plate, and they eat the 2 nuggets and they ask for more or vocalize or whatever, and you say, yep, you can have 1 more, or even if they haven't vocalized, they want another, you hold up the nugget and say 1 bite of that, and then you get the other nugget. It's all a negotiation, right? You're reinforcing taking the bite with the nugget. Good girl, you ate the thing, whatever it is. So you get the nugget or you get more french fries. But do it in small amounts. Don't sit there and expect them to eat a huge pile of mashed cauliflower the first time. Oh, our expectations get us in trouble all the time, don't they?